Hi everyone, Baggio here, and welcome to the Baggio podcast. And today I have a very special person. This is a guy that I've known for many years. And funny story, I used to want to sell him an investment, which turned out to be a scam. And he was actually advising me to not go against it, not invest on it, but I proceed to anyway, and I lost all my money. And that's just a fun story, right? Like I remember trying to sell it to him, and then he was like, "I think it's a scam, but I like you as a person, so let me consider." Do you remember?
I remember.
Yeah. So anyway, this guy is a very interesting person. I'll leave it to you to introduce yourself, like maybe in 3 sentences.
Hi, my name is Luke. I'm also better known as Money Maverick. I was a former FA. Now I'm basically
What is
giving financial advisor.
Yeah.
Yeah, so now I'm giving lectures to or teaching other financial advisors how to do their job, as well as I run a couple of smaller businesses.
So I think a little bit by yourself. You used to before you started as a financial advisor, you were an MOE teacher, earning 2 to 3K, right? Was it?
No, I was not with MOE. I could only do private because MOE would not take me. That's how stupid I am. So it's a tough life.
And you were earning 2 to 3 thousand.
I was earning about at peak probably about maybe 2.6 a month. Yeah.
And like, do you want me asking like what was your max income after becoming a financial advisor? Like,
In 2021, I probably made about, I mean, after we account for various sources of income, almost 700,000.
wow, that's a lot. How do you feel about going from like 2.6K a month? I mean, to be frank, a lot of people would never have thought that, working a normal job and transiting to a financial advisory would actually give you that much of an income, because I know a lot of financial advisors, and you know a lot of financial advisors who don't necessarily get to even 200K a year.
Sure.
So like curious, like what made you want to strive towards that?
I think the context was that, firstly, I had made a commitment to try to change my life because I realized that teaching is not gonna do it for me. It's not going to make me a lot of money that will be able to build a family and a life. I had someone which I cared very much about, which I thought that this is worth like taking a really huge risk on. So I kept committed myself to the job, and thankfully I was in a very good environment to grow. And then as I grew, I began to try different things, whether or not it's to expand my business knowledge, like outside of advisory, whether I honed up on my technical and sales skills as well, and to learn basic stuff like digital marketing, etc. Like all of your components to not just run a good FA business, but like business in general. Yeah.
Okay, so like that's pretty interesting because, like, I mean, like I know a lot of FAs that don't have that mindset. Ironically, like they come into this industry because they want to make a lot of money, but then they think like a clown, and they act like a clown. So, like, I'm just curious, like, what's your thought process behind, like you? I mean, because everybody also have that same drive, right? They have a family, they have someone they want to take care of, but
Yeah.
you acted very differently, and like I'm just curious, like, what were you telling yourself that made you so driven? Because from what I remember, you were working almost every day
Yeah.
for the first couple of years.
Yeah.
And if you're not working, you would either be sick,
Yeah.
and you would always usually like end work at like 11, 12, or sometimes even 2 to 3.
Later. Yeah. Usually later.
Yeah, like just curious, like if I were to ask you a question, what are 3 things that would actually summarize your success as a financial advisor that literally hit peak income of 700K? What would that 3 things be? Like in summary.
The first thing to bear in mind would be that when people tell you that there's flexible hours in this industry, they're not referring to your capacity to work like a 8-hour day and move that time around. Like we're talking about the capacity to be able to work more hours in a day that will allow you to make more income. That's about it, right? So you have to bear this in mind that when you decide to transition from any kind of regular job, or if you come out as a student, that you're going to work much more hours because like they tell you that this is your business lah. So that's point number one, right? And point number two is that since they tell you that this is your own business, you have to really take accountability for it. So you should know a lot of business basics as much as possible. You should account for like general accounting, like where your taxes are going, what you're willing to spend on the business, right? What portion is going to marketing, what portion is going to, if you need someone to help you with a certain amount of paperwork, so on and so forth. All these things need to be taken into account because you have to believe that this is your own business. And once you start to act like a businessman, then a lot of the facets come into play very quickly, right? I'll say the third thing is that you have to really have a lot of strong mental resilience because rejection is very, very common in this particular industry. And even if you were to start, let's say, like a food business, I would say that a lot of friends and family would be usually more supportive. They'll bring like a big bouquet of flowers, say congratulations on your opening, right? Then they'll come by and then they'll buy all sorts of crap on opening night, for example, right? They're not going to do that if you become FA. Almost never.
Why? Like, why not? Like,
Because becoming FA is generally pretty frowned upon, and for good reason. I mean, firstly, FAs don't have a very good reputation, right? And can't really blame Singaporeans for thinking as much, lah, because we see that a lot of people who don't understand business at its core will become very desperate salesmen, or they'll try to live out a life which they don't actually have.
yeah, that's interesting. I think like when you talk on all these 3 points, right, there was one thing that really caught my attention, which was like the business owner mindset. Like a lot of them, they enter it, and like if you were to dive deeper into the business owner mindset, like because I remember watching you how you run your business, I think you'll be more willing to spend on things like, for example, whether is it investment in yourself, or whether is it like hiring staff. And a lot of financial advisors, from what I see, they are very resistant to hiring people, even though logically it makes sense for them to do so. Financially, it makes sense for them to do so, so they can outsource the things that don't give them money and focus more on sales, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But a lot of them don't think like that. And like, what's your thoughts on that? Like, why do they act like that, or they would just rather buy a car and stuff like that?
Well, it's because most people don't even have an idea on how they want to conduct the business in the first place. So, for example, when you start out in this line of work where you decide that, okay, I'm going to spend a good number of years, if not potentially the rest of my life, selling insurance, right? So you should think about how you want to do that, lah. And as a business owner, you always think about, firstly, who is it that I want to sell to? Why am I selling it? Like how do I enjoy the process? How do I expand my market? Do I want to sell very, very big policies to 100 people, or do I want to sell to like 1,000 people a year? Right? That's a world of difference in terms of how you eventually decide how you want to structure your business. Do I want to get promoted to management and then directorship and recruit people under me? Or do I want to keep having such a humongous budget to hire a lot of administrative staff and then to be the one that's running around closing sales cases? Right? That's all different decisions that you have to make when you're considering what kind of business you want to run in the future. And most people don't even have a foundation on this because they've not even considered more than how to get by the next week or the next month. And so that's where you become very, very desperate because you don't understand what you're doing. And then there's a couple of circumstances which will force you to have, like, it will force you to be in a situation where you're acting out someone else's fantasy to some degree because you need to convince people that you're doing well. You can't ever convince people that you're doing badly. Right, so all sorts of stuff adds up to the degree of which you stop thinking like a business person and start acting like a desperate salesman.
And that's funny, right? Because a lot of people, they go into this industry because they want to make a lot of money, and they don't come from like well-off families, and they don't have a lot of resources
Or education.
or education. So, for example, like when you first started out, like you were earning 2.6K, how do you get by that phase where you did not have to come off as desperate, but yet you also are kind of in a desperate situation? I don't know if it makes sense.
But you would come off as desperate. And so what I mean is that there's going to be a certain phase or a certain point in the career where for weeks or months or even years on end you will come off as exceptionally desperate, because there's just going to be days which you really need the money more than other days, and it shows when you speak to your clients. It shows in the tone of your voice. It shows in your body, for example. It shows in some of the arguments that may not make as much logical sense as to why someone should hurry up and do a purchase, for example, right? I think that over time I realized that professionally you have to keep cool. It means that even if I'm screaming in my head that, oh, I really want you to go and buy this thing now, can you hurry up and stop telling me that you want to think about it? Like, you just have to be cool, because if you did your job, you did your job well, ma. So if you don't fundamentally believe that, then you're going to find that you're very, very desperate. Yeah, so eventually when you have a certain amount of confidence and competence, that means that you know that you're doing a good job, you believe in what you're doing, you know that you can do this job better and better and better, your business plan is going according to scale, the benefits for doing this have been good for your clients, your family, your friends, so on and so forth, then you start to get to a point where, do I really need to be so desperate about if I sell this now, if I sell this next week, right? Of course, there are some legitimate reasons for desperation, lah, because I have some trauma over some clients which I wish I had been more pushy so that they'll get insurance earlier.
Right.
Because sometimes there can be repercussions for not getting insurance earlier. That's the reality of selling insurance in the first place. But for the most part, most people, we live in a very educational and technological society where people should make a very, very clear decision when they want to commit easily a big five, small six-figure amount, usually for the mass market, like across a number of years, be it anywhere between 5 and 25 years. It's not a small commitment to be making, so it's not abnormal for people to want to take their time a little bit, to want to discuss it with their loved ones. And so if you don't get this, but you're still chasing after it, then you're going to find that it's very, very hard to get out of the desperate salesman mode, lah. And so once you understand that very well and you have some confidence in your business, then you'll get over your phase progressively. You'll still occasionally get a pang of desperation. I certainly would be a little irritated if I didn't complete a sale within a stipulated amount of time, which I would prefer. But you shouldn't have that reflect as much as when you first start out in the business, lah. I do think that a certain amount of desperation is inevitable, so you shouldn't beat yourself up. Means that if you lose clients due to being desperate, especially for the first few months of the job or even the first year on the job, just accept that it's a part of your maturing process, lah. It's a part of your capacity to become a better agent. Yeah.
Nice. I think that's a very well thought of answer, because a lot of times people can't really give an answer to that. Like they would just say, like, you just have to work hard and play the numbers game, and eventually things will get better. So I think knowing you then also, right, like if we don't mind diving a little bit deeper, like I think you mentioned that ironically right now, like when you were earning 150 to 180-ish a year as a financial advisor, you felt like you were more happy and more balanced compared to earning like 600 or 700K. Could you actually elaborate more on that? Because I feel for a lot of people listening, they always have this thought process as a financial advisor that maybe earning more might be better, or they might be have more recognition or more people wanting to come to them. But because you've been there, right, and
Right.
you have been doing things like you've been doing well, doing good then, and you wanted to serve your clients,
Right.
how was it really like earning like between, like what was your life like when you were earning 180K a year and 700K?
Right. Well, when I first earned 180K in that year, it was exceptionally joyful because obviously I had never made this kind of money in my entire life. So that was like a big surprise to me to know that I could do it, right? And so that made me very, very happy. And people can kind of sense when you finally hit a point of happiness in your career, because arguably if I had continued on a very regular career trajectory, that I could have made what I made before 180K eventually, right? But 180K was very groundbreaking for me because it's not easy to do that as someone in your mid-20s, right? And so that was a very, very good moment where I felt that people can really share my joy to some degree, lah. So I was more generous with my money and my time. My colleagues were a lot more supportive in the sense that they celebrated this milestone with me. You're at a level of income that is praised by your company, but not to the degree of which you need exceptional recognition where the pressure is just absurd, right? So nobody is going to ask you how you did your business to such a ridiculous degree, but everyone will praise you for it, which is pretty sweet, right? You can still hit all of the minimum incentive trips and all of the minimum highest benefits that the company has to offer, while not being under pressure to, for example, like give talks or to go and coach somebody or to try to expand your career significantly beyond what you had already achieved, lah.
Yeah.
I had a lot of breathing room, so that was very, very good. And I think that there wasn't really much pressure for me to try to become phenomenally better at the time, lah. Frankly, even to me at the time in my mid-20s, it was such a groundbreaking moment that I kind of wish that if I could just do this every single year at the same level, that would be the best, right? That was really when I was most content with life, lah. By the time I hit about that $700,000 mark, I was working a lot more, and there was a lot more pressure from the company and my supervisors to go and perform and to go and report on how I would perform and hit bigger and better numbers in the future, and to account for why I was behind time or whatever. If I said I was going on holiday, they would voice their concerns, it was a very, very frustrating time to be in. And at the time, I was also looking to progress from management eventually into like maybe a director or something, right? But it wasn't really very clear to me that that was what I wanted as much as what the environment was pushing me to do as well. I think that that is not so bad if you have a very clear business plan from the start. But if you let a lot of these things influence your business plan, like for example, everybody is telling you that, oh, you're doing so well, you're doing so great, you should go into management or directorship, and you don't actually feel it's your path, but everyone's telling you that that's what you should do, then it's very, very frustrating and very, very stressful. And my relative income was not very high. It means I was making a lot of money in a year, but if you look at the amount I made per hour, it was around the same, which didn't make a lot of sense to me, right? Because you don't you give up a lot of things if you're trying to work that many hours in a year.
For the 700K.
Yeah, it was not worth it compared to when I was making 180 lah. I would say that, anyway, life is not about work. So some people may feel differently, and I do think that there are people who, like myself, would be willing to trade in a couple of years of their lives for 700K a year lah. Like, because there's a couple of mil if you just give up a couple of years of your life, and you can kind of take your time to recoup your relationships and your health, right? But I wouldn't really recommend it, having been through it myself. It was certainly a lot worse on my health, my life, my relationships than when I was making 180K a year.
So, wow, thanks for sharing. It seems like it's not all great and rosy.
Yeah, of course not.
So, I guess if I were to ask you one last question, right? Like, what are three things about the financial advisory industry, right, that if you knew about it, it would make you reconsider this industry? Like, or maybe like if I rephrase the question, like, what are three things that a lot of people don't know about this industry that is shady as shit, or like it's just not as pleasant as what people think? What are three things, like in summary, like a short one?
Well, I talked about some of this on my podcast, on the Building Financial Fitness podcast with Misfit FI, that Junius U, the MediaCorp podcast. So you can go and check that out. Hopefully, Baggio will provide a link, but you can just type in the dark side of financial advisory with Junius U. Quite easy to find. I did talk about some of this. One, of course, is that the median income, similar to most MLMs, even though this is a legal MLM, that does have, it does have what we call like the governmental approval, basically. Like, we do see that the pros are better than the cons, right? But at the end of the day, it is based on an MLM structure, and most MLMs, people at the bottom don't tend to make a lot of money, and the median is not very high as well. So if you're trying to leave your corporate job to potentially make a lot more money, you should think very, very hard about it. So that's one.
Okay.
Number two is that it's not uncommon for a situation where if you get in and you start to do well in the very first year because you're selling to your friends and family, you may have this over complacent sense of self. It means that you may think that you're very good, and everyone will affirm that you're very good in the industry, whether it's your managers, your directors, your company, even though you have no skill sets developed whatsoever in the slightest. So you may make a disproportionately high amount of money in your first year, but then you may have no skills. So the next year after that, the company will reward you with all sorts of trips and stuff like that, which is fine, which is good. I was very happy to receive those trips, but because you develop no skill sets in the slightest, right? So you're not going to make nearly as much money as you did the previous year, and you're on holiday for a lot of the time, so you're spending money. And then by the end of that year, you have basically no sales, no skill set, no nothing. So you may leave, and then your manager and your company gets all of your clients, which is pretty much your friends and family, right? So it's very warped in that sense where it's not that there is no incentive to train you to make you become better, but the incentive is not very high. So it's as if I were your manager, I could do without training you if I thought that it was going to be too much trouble for me. I can just let you go into like your own self-destruction, and then I can pick up your leads from there. Right? So I can go and sell to your friends and family because I'll still be in the business, you're gone. Right?
The last thing?
Yeah. I mean, there's quite a few. I guess the last thing,
The
juiciest. Well, I guess
leadership or management.
I think I covered some of that already, but leadership or management. I mean, let's just say that if you want to get promoted to management, you shouldn't. It will be based off your capacity to sell stuff. But then when you actually become a manager, it has pretty much no bearing at all on the slightest. You have to learn an entirely new skill set, and I have to tell you that most people who do well in sales are usually not suitable managers. So be wary that if you decide to join the industry because someone has a very strong sales performance, ask them about what kind of systems they have in mind or have already implemented. Don't gay kiang just because they did well means that you'll do well also. It's a very stupid reason to join somebody.
All right, thanks a lot for sharing. I think that's a lot of information for today. So if I were to ask you, okay, one last question, right? Because I think the mic is like getting out of battery. But how would you describe your advisory life, like past 5-6 years in advisory, in one sentence? In one pros and one cons, one sentence each. What would that be?
If you can sacrifice a lot, you will make a lot of money.
Okay, that's the pros for one sentence.
No, that was the pro and the con.
Okay.
If you sacrifice a lot, you can make a lot of money lah. It's true lah. And I was happy to do it. I have no regrets.
Okay.
I sacrificed my health, my six-pack abs, a lot of my friendships and relationships.
Yeah.
To some degree also romantic relationships, precious time with my parents, my nieces, right? But I would say it was totally worth it, at least for a while lah. And you can still find a balance eventually if you really want lah. Doesn't have to be forever. Just bear in mind that you should remember that if you seriously consider something your business, that you should really render at least 2 to 3 years of your life as completely gone. Nobody can create a successful business without dedicating at least a good chunk of your life to it. I'll say a year to 3 years, where you're really just, this is what I live, eat and breathe, it's my child, that kind of commitment. It cannot be anything less than that.